Story 1. Here's the revised version of the content with grammatical and punctuation corrections, properly sized paragraphs, and expletives replaced with milder alternatives suitable for the YouTube Partner Program. Acronyms are fully spelled out. For this story, you need to know that I am the kind of person who will go to great lengths for a good laugh, as you will see below. I love this story, and we recount it every once in a while, even though it has been more than 20 years. I live in the United States and own an information technology support company. Many years ago, I used a mobile phone company named Nextel. They had a great push-to-talk feature that turned your phone into a walkie-talkie, which was perfect for communicating with coworkers in my information technology work. However, their customer service was a nightmare. Anytime I needed to contact them, it would take at least 30 to 40 minutes on hold. Eventually, I had to switch to a cheaper service, which meant getting a new number. Now, you can transfer your number to a new carrier, but back then, you had to change numbers if you switched carriers. I canceled all the phones on our plan except for mine, which I downgraded to an emergency plan costing about $10 a month. I left the old phone plugged in at my office and set my voicemail message to instruct callers of my new number. The phone just sat next to my desk on a shelf, plugged into a charger, so I could see if anyone called. I could also hear the phone make a sound when it disconnected from the cellular network, and then a different sound when it connected to the cellular network. It connected and disconnected constantly there in my office. I would estimate that it only stayed connected to the network about 50% of the time. After 6 months, I decided to cancel it. I had to wait on hold for the customary 30 to 40 minutes just to cancel my service. After telling the service representative that I was always dropping off the network and that I had already switched services, they verified the service problems on my account and canceled my entire plan. I wasn't under any contract at the time, so there was no problem canceling my service with Nextel. As expected, I got my final bill. It was somewhere around $10 since that was my monthly plan, just the emergency plan, and I didn't make any phone calls. I paid the bill and was happy to be done with that carrier. Then, the next month, I got a bill for 4 cents. Yes, just 4 cents. I figured it was a clerical error and ignored it, expecting them to write it off. But no, each month, another bill for 4 cents arrived. I was incredulous. I checked the postmark and saw that the postage to send me the bill was costing them 10 times more than the bill itself. And they kept sending the bill every month. I could have paid the bill, but it seemed ridiculous to write a check for 4 cents and spend more on a stamp. After 6 months, I finally had enough and decided on some very petty, mischievous compliance. I decided to invest the 40 minutes on hold to call Nextel to work this out. If they wanted my 4 cents, I would give them my 4 cents. I planned to wait on hold for 40 minutes and pay the 4 cents with a credit card, knowing it would cost them more in fees. I told my wife about my plan, thinking it was the perfect mischievous compliance story. But my wife, the true master of mischievous compliance, suggested an even better idea. Call and ask if I could make payments on the 4 cents, splitting it into 2 payments on my credit card. Wow, I was in the presence of mischievous royalty. I called, waited on hold for 40 to 45 minutes, and finally got through to a representative. The representative sounded like one of those airport terminal attendants who act like they are checking your reservations, but instead are writing a Stephen King-length novel. I could hear the clickety-clackety sound of the keyboard. The female representative was constantly typing as I explained that I had canceled my service, but kept getting the final bill and proposed making payments. The representative, typing away, said she'd look up my account. As she typed away at her keyboard, I explained that I had gotten the final bill and that I would like to set up a payment plan to take care of the outstanding balance. I told her that I would like to pay half on my credit card today and pay the remaining half the following month. She was agreeing with me and typing away when suddenly she stopped typing and went quiet. "Sir," she said. "Yes," I replied. "Are you aware of the balance amount?" "Yes," I said. 4 cents, she said. "Yes," I said. "I figured that you really wanted that 4 cents because you keep spending all this postage to send me bills each month. so I'm just calling you to take care of it." After a brief silence, I heard the clickety-clack of the keyboard again, and she said that I would not have to worry about the balance because she was writing it off. I insisted on giving my credit card for the first half of the payment, but she firmly dismissed it and assured me I wouldn't get any more bills. My wife's suggestion turned a simple prank into a masterpiece of mischievous compliance. I may be good at it, but my wife is on another level, and you really have to want to do mischievous compliance to wait on hold for 40 minutes. Edit 1. Thank you to all you kindred spirits of mischievous compliance. I wanted to post an edit to show what I've learned from this great community. Although I have fond memories of this story, my wife and I both laugh at the other, possibly better, options for dealing with this situation. First, a couple of commenters stated that I was unwise for waiting on the phone for 40 minutes to do this. Yes, no argument there. But my first line above states that I will go to great lengths for a laugh. However, no customer service representatives were injured in this exercise. The conversation only took a couple of minutes. I saved the company money because they fixed their error, stopped spending more on postage than the actual bill, and I was working in my office while I was on hold. So, a little time traded for a funny story. Second, some people had great ideas for other possibilities. Most suggested paying slightly more than the 4 cents so that Nextel would have to deal with the refund. Then Nextel would constantly have to send me statements in the mail. I like this. And if Nextel ever sent a refund check, I wouldn't cash it. I know in my own business that when a customer writes a check for a penny off, it causes me at least 5 minutes to fix. Sometimes it even takes a little longer. So, this option appeals to me. One commenter suggested paying it with British currency to make them deal with conversion asterisk and asterisk a refund. I asterisk love asterisk this. Do you know how much that would cost me? I would definitely do this next time. Another commenter suggested taping 4 pennies to the bill and mailing it in. I wondered if taping 5 pennies would generate more issues for Nextel and give me a 1-cent credit. Story 2. A bit of background. I used to work at a popular grocery store that's known for bending over backward for customers. I started working for this grocery store during my gap year before college. I wanted to save up some money before taking on the daunting burden that is student loans. When I started, the job was easy enough, and the vast majority of people were kind. I didn't have to deal with many difficult customers, and the hours were flexible. I really enjoyed my coworkers and managers. Life seemed great until our department got a new boss. I don't know what it is about new bosses, but they always seem to go on a power trip to consolidate their authority and to show everyone that they mean business. Our new manager, who we'll call Karen, went around the department and started criticizing people for the most trivial things. Even if we were doing our job correctly, she would show up and tell us to work faster or accuse us of stealing company time. We all disliked her, but since she was our boss, we just tried to do what we were told. I pride myself on finding the quickest and most efficient way to do a job. Thanks for the upbringing, Mom. I applied this approach to any of my duties for the day. It just so happened that the end of the day was approaching, and we had to return products that customers had left behind non-perishable, of course. I was volunteered, more like ordered, to go do it. This wasn't an issue, as I had done this plenty of times before. I went about my task and finished in about 10 minutes. The moment I was done, Karen called me into her office, and the following conversation ensued. Karen manager: close the door. Now, do you know why I called you in here? Me: no. Karen manager: I am trying to improve efficiency in the department, and you took way too long to do those go-backs. I won't tolerate people slacking off in my department. Do you understand? Me: I wasn't slacking off, trying to defend myself. I was just cutting me off, she reiterated. Karen manager: do you understand? Knowing I was being railroaded, I just sighed and said, yes. Karen manager: to ensure you don't slack off again, you are forbidden from doing any more go-backs. I don't care if the store manager tells you otherwise. This is my department, and you will do as I say. I'm the boss." I got a smile on my face as I realized what she had just said. I nodded my head and replied, "Me. Understood. I won't do go-backs no matter what." Karen Manager replied with a smug smile and said, "Karen Manager, good. Now go back to work and don't forget what I said. I'm the boss." I turned around so she couldn't see my self-satisfied grin and said, "Me. Don't worry." Message received loud and clear. A few days went by without incident until I finally got a chance to put my passive-aggressive compliance into action. The front desk supervisor noticed that the go-back cart was full and asked me to return the products. I smiled and said, "Me? Sorry, supervisor. Karen Manager said I was wasting time, and I am no longer allowed to return products." The supervisor gave me a weird look, but just shrugged and told another coworker to do it instead. This cycle continued for the next month. One day, the store manager happened to be manning the front desk. As the end of the day rolled around, he looked at me and said, "Store manager, hey, we have a lot of go-backs, and I need you to return them." Me. "Sorry, store manager, I'm not allowed to do go-backs anymore on account of slacking off." The store manager looked frustrated and said, "Store manager, I don't care if you are allowed to or not. I am telling you to take these back." Me. "Sorry, store manager. Karen Manager told me I am not to do any more go-backs no matter what, and I'd better follow her orders. Karen Manager told me that this is her department and that she is the boss." The store manager looked furious and stormed into the manager's office. A few minutes later, the store manager called Karen Manager to his office over the intercom. Karen Manager came waddling out of her office and went into the store manager's office. The door closed, and we could all hear muffled yelling. After about 10 minutes, the door opened and Karen Manager shuffled out. She glared daggers at me and told me to come to her office. I happily complied and said, "Me. Yes, Karen Manager, how can I be of assistance?" Karen Manager, "You are allowed to do go-backs again. That is all." I smirked and left her office, happy that I could put Karen in her place. Update. I'm surprised a lot of people enjoyed my story. I will continue sharing stories from this job and a hospital I used to work at. Hope you all enjoy them. Update Part 2. I forgot about Rule 8. Hopefully, the original poster doesn't really count. Everything else should be fixed. Story 3. This story takes place about 2 months before I quit my job at the grocery store and started my first year of college. This story has a bit of exposition, so please bear with me. I was glad when I got to put my Karen Manager in her place. Things had slowly started to cool down, and for the next few months it was business as usual. The old store manager had to open another store, so they brought in a new one. This one was very professional and quite kind. This store manager always recognized various employees in different departments for their hard work. This recognition of us lower employees made our Karen Manager less than happy. I had started to notice a lot more people being hired and everyone's hours suffered because of it. I found out later they did this because part-time employees could be paid less, and they wanted to cut costs. 'Tis the life of a retail worker. I wanted to keep making money in preparation for college, so I went into Karen Manager's office and said, "Me, hey, Karen Manager. I noticed my hours were being cut, and I wanted to see if I could pick up some extra shifts." She scoffed at me and said, "Karen Manager, it's a department-wide decision. If you want hours, go to another department. I wouldn't waste your time, though." I looked at her confused and asked, "Me, why not?" "Karen Manager, they only have hard-working employees in their departments. You wouldn't fit in." I was dumbfounded. I thought Karen's BS bully routine was over, but boy was I wrong. I stood there unsure what to say. Meanwhile, Karen Manager had another umbrage smile plastered on her face. I just turned around and walked out of her office. I didn't know if Karen Manager had already lied to the other managers or not, but I might as well ask. I first went to the meat department and explained my situation. I told the manager that our department's hours were being cut and asked if I could do anything to help them out. The meat manager smiled warmly and said, "Meat manager, I understand how frustrating low hours can be. We have a guy on vacation for a few weeks, and we have had to stay late to wash all the pans and plates for our meat. It's simple washing and drying. You get to wear headphones within reason, and you would make what a starting meat associate would. Want the job?" I was beaming and immediately took the offer. The job was simple as he promised, and I took it seriously. I wanted to show other managers that I was a hard worker and reliable. 3 weeks passed by with no issue. Inevitably, their missing associate came back, and I had to be let go from that position. Luckily, I had spoken to the grocery manager the day before, and our conversation was somewhat similar. I explained my situation, and she understood. She said, "Grocery manager, you just need to tidy up the shelves, put out product on aisle-labeled carts, and held unload trucks when they come in. Your pay will be a starting grocery associate pay." For context, both types of associate pay were an increase from my normal department. I took the offer and immediately helped the grocery department. Everything was fine until grocery hired a full-time employee and I had to go back to my normal department. I expected buousness as usual, but I got one hell of a surprise. The first day back, Karen manager yanked me in her office. The conversation went like this. "Karen manager, what the hell do you think you are doing? Up. I told you our department's hours were cut." "Me, I know. You said I could try working with other departments. You also said some other nasty things, but I don't care to repeat those." She glared at me and said, "Karen manager, up. You are making our department look bad. We are trying to cut costs, and you are burning through hours we don't have." I decided to correct this smug Karen and said, "Me, I understand you want to cut costs, and you only have so many hours. I didn't take up any extra hours from our department. I took your rude suggestion and worked for other departments that were short-staffed and had an abundance of hours. I did nothing wrong." She growled at me and said, "Karen manager, listen up. It's not fair to others in our department if you get full-time and other employees don't." I held my ground and said, "Me, this system of hiring tons of part-timers is stupid, and it's hurting quality full-time employees who need the hours. If you insist on hiring all these people, there is nothing stopping them from doing exactly what I did. There are plenty of departments that could use help." I was fed up with Karen's attitude and spoke my mind. "Karen manager, if you think my management practice is so ridiculous, you can just leave." I was tired of her BS and just smiled. "Me, okay, I will." I turned in my effects and clocked out. I said bye to my friends and drove home. The next day I was enjoying sleeping in for once when I got a phone call. It was the new store manager. I answered. "Me, hello store manager, how are you this morning?" "Store manager, sorry to bother you up, but could you come back to the store? I looked over the firing of you yesterday and Karen manager was totally out of line. I talked to other managers you have worked for, and they all had glowing reviews of your work. We are pretty short-staffed, and we need you back." Me, I smiled. It was always nice to be needed after all. "If you transfer me to grocery effective immediately with a pay bump to boot. I will help your department when needed, but I want grocery manager as my new boss." "Store manager, done. I just pulled up your file and transferred you over. You have my word, grocery manager is your new boss and Karen manager has no authority over you anymore. I will be having a long talk with her over her managerial practices, believe me." I smirked and said, "Me, I will see you in 10 minutes. I drove to the store and walked in. I picked up my effects from the store manager and shook his hand. I saw the shocked form of Karen manager and snickered. I turned to a nearby customer with a smile. These last few weeks were going to be the best. Story 4. Over the summer, I worked at Walmart, and I loved my job. I was 16, and Walmart was right across from my high school, but there was one night I can never forget. It was 9 p.m., and I was about to close my register when a woman came into my line with a cart full of items and her 2 kids. I tried to tell her that I was closed, but she didn't listen and proceeded to place her items on the belt. Because I have social anxiety, I stayed calm and rang her up because I wanted to be polite. She asked, "Where is the Advil?" I responded, "I'm not sure, I'm just a cashier. I'm sorry." She insisted, "Could you check behind you to see if there is any behind you?" I obliged. "Sure," I turned my head and said, "Sorry, we don't have any behind me." I knew we didn't sell Advil up front, but I checked anyway just to make her happy. Suddenly, she shouted, "Oh my goodness, you are so rude." I was confused. "What? I'm sorry? I don't understand." She continued to yell, "You are so rude, it's unbelievable." She kept repeating this until my manager arrived. My manager asked, "What's the issue?" The woman complained, "I asked her if you all have Advil in the front, and she didn't check properly. She just turned her head." My manager explained, "Sorry, cashiers aren't allowed to leave their spots," and then walked away. As this was happening, I continued bagging her items while she kept screaming at me. "You don't know how to bag at all," she exclaimed. I apologized. "I'm sorry, maybe ask your son or daughter to bag, or you can bag your own items." But she demanded, "No, I want you to bag these items for me." She then proceeded to tell me what items should go in each bag. Now for the interesting part. Walmart has these bag carousels that move, and while I was ringing her up and bagging, my hip got close to the carousel. She pushed it into my hip. I was shocked. "Oh my goodness, did you just hit me on purpose?" She only smirked in response. Finally, I finished with her items, and she looked at me and said, "Put the last bag in the cart." I refused. "Nope, I'm not going to do it." Then I handed the bag to her son. I went home and cried. You might be wondering why I didn't quit, scream, or defend myself. It's because, first, I have social anxiety and frequently experience anxiety attacks where I shake uncontrollably. I got this job as a cashier as a way to battle my social anxiety and push my limits by talking to people, even if it's just saying hi and giving a smile. Second, my mom was proud of me for having a job, and she was struggling financially at the time, so my job was helping pay bills. Lastly, I tried my best to defend myself, but my manager and coworkers just stared at me. Please don't blame me. I was 16 and scared. Story 5. Years ago, shortly after I had left the service, my girlfriend, now wife, and I moved in together, halfway across the S from both of our respective families. Long stories for another time, and to a place where we both had friends as a result of our military travels. One of my wife's friends, we'll call her Anna, had gotten married in the intervening years since they had last been together, and was in the process of a divorce since her husband had knocked up the checkout girl at the local orchard. She had left the home, a single wide trailer, important later they owned, left the car they owned which she had solely paid for and was still in her name, moved back in with her parents, and got a second job. She already worked at a large big box retail establishment. Of course, my wife and I commiserate with her on multiple occasions about how poorly she had been treated. Anna made a remark at one point about missing her bills that month. My wife asked, "What bills? You live with your parents, you have 2 jobs, no credit cards, and you never do anything expensive. What could you possibly owe anyone money for?" It turns out that she still had a checking account linked to her ex-husband's account, and when he decided not to pay the mortgage or the car payment, they simply took it out of her account, marked the loan current, and went on with their lives. Shortly after the divorce, he would make most payments, but for the last year or so, he hasn't made a single one. So ex-hubby has perfect credit because he never misses a payment, and Anna's credit is in the toilet because she is constantly late on her own bills. Anna may have 2 jobs, and not a lot of bills: cell phone, car payment, insurance. When she's making someone else's mortgage and car payments as well, she's pretty much broke. And that's why she never does anything expensive, and has to have me change her oil in my gravel driveway because she can't afford $20 for Jiffy Lube. I asked her why she didn't close the accounts and go somewhere else. Anna's answer: "But if they miss their payments, the bank will take their house and their car, and they have a baby. I can't do that to them." I did the Forrest Whitaker eye. Then I said, "They're taking advantage of you pretty badly. They've established that you'll pay all their bills for them, and they can do whatever the hell they want, because you'll never force the sale of the house or the car. If I had an option to pay my bills, or pass it off to someone I don't like, I'd let them do it every time. He's paying an electric bill and getting a free house, car, and everything else. And I guarantee you that he's handing these bills to the social worker and claiming he can't afford to live, so they'll give him WIC, food stamps, and everything else. You're funding the lifestyle of a jerk who cheated on you, and a woman who knew he was married because every time she came over, she made him take your wedding pictures down so she didn't have to look at you while she got intimate with your husband. You're paying bills for a guy who is so dumb that he thought he couldn't get a woman pregnant he wasn't married to, and a woman who thought that because she was cheating, she wouldn't get pregnant. Those witches. You see, I may not give a rip about most of my family, but you do not mess with my friends." She gives it some thought and a couple of days later asks for some help out of this. I took her to my bank to get an account the next day. She moves her direct deposit, withdraws her money, and closes her old account. Next month, ex-hubby's bills don't get paid. We're watching a movie when he calls. She spends an hour in a screaming match with him, telling him to pay his own bills. She has been charitable enough, and he and his new wife can pay for their own stuff. Then the penny drops. Remember earlier when I said the house was a trailer? Anna has been paying the mortgage on the trailer, but not the rent for the lot it's on. They never had her checking account. This entitled prick has been assuming she's been paying that too. She assumed he had. He hasn't even figured out what's coming yet. He's calling because he's pissed off she hasn't paid the lot rent in forever, and he's being told to pay up, move his trailer, or they'll do it and hold the trailer in arrears until the bill for moving it is paid. He's calling to ask her for another $6,000, or they'll lose the home they both loved so much. Now, up until this moment, Anna had been this sweet, wonderful gumdrop of a person. The type of person that it should be legal to slap if they're encountered before 9 a.m. The relentlessly sunny person that you send into the room to cheer up Tinkerbell. For the better part of a year, I haven't heard this woman say a bad thing about anybody. Until tonight. Until this guy called to complain that she hadn't been paying enough of his bills. And she loses her mind. She lights into this guy that he'd better figure it out, because he's not getting another penny from her ever again. And while he's figuring out who to beg, borrow, or steal that money from, he may want to get a little extra since he's about to get the overdue notices for the house and the car too. He starts screaming so loud, I can clearly hear what he's calling her from across the room before she calmly hits the end button, flips the phone over, pops the battery out, sets them both down on my table, hits play on the VCR, morphs back into her normally sunny self, and offers to make popcorn. Monday morning, she went to the lawyer, filed a no-contact order, filed for bankruptcy. Her credit was already a mess. There were bills her name was on, and she didn't want that splatter all over her, and called the dealer that owned her car note, told her she couldn't make the payments anymore, and offers them a voluntary repossession, has them bring out their tow truck, and meets the driver with the keys and the paperwork, signs them forms, asks the driver oh so sweetly to drop her off at her parents' house on the way back to the dealer, and waves at her ex from the passenger seat of the tow truck as he comes running out of the trailer wearing only a towel. Over the course of the next month or two, he lost his job because he couldn't get to work anymore. His wife had to go back to weighing pears at the orchard. Turns out she'd left her job when Anna was paying for everything, and sell his record collection, which was what he'd been spending his money on while someone else was paying for everything. On the bright side, I picked up original vinyl copies of Abbey Road and Yellow Submarine for a total of $5 because his idiot wife running their yard sale didn't understand why the old, crappy records were worth anything anyway. And that's how Tinkerbell burned some entitled jerk's life to the ground. Story 6. I asked my father to write this up, and I said I would post it. This story has always given me a laugh. Please enjoy. I worked for a large computer assembly plant in the western United States in the late 1990s. I was the lead tech for the value-added reseller. When we were able to reach a zero-missed service level agreement time, the MSLAT, we were promised a pay increase and a team party. I managed to lead my team to this level and maintained it for 3 months. No other lead or site manager was able to reach it, let alone maintain it for 3 months. I had 5 techs to handle trouble calls for 1,500 employees. I asked the Karen Jeff when we were going to get our raises and party. He only said soon, and then said if you do not maintain it for another 3 months, you will lose it. That was not the incentive I was promised when I took the job, so I complained to the home office. Jeff called me into his office and threatened to have me demoted if I went over his head again. The company had an open-door policy that contained a zero retaliation clause. I again contacted the home office and was told Jeff was given the funds, $500, and a budget increase to cover $6.50 per hour, $1.50 for the on-site lead, and $1 per hour per tech. For raises to our pay the first month, we hit the MSLAT goal. Now I'm just a bit irked. So I confronted Jeff with the report from the home office. I also reminded him of the no retaliation policy. He did not know that the home office told me the amounts of funds allotted. He then asked me who I thought I was going over his head. I'm the lead for this site, and I have a responsibility to my techs for their rewards for their commitments and extra effort, I said. He shrieked, "You will mind your place or find another job." So about 2 weeks went by, and we finally got our party. 5 pizzas at $10 each and a pre-made cake from a local grocery store that said "Good job" on it at $30. I got a 15 cents per hour raise, and each tech received 10 cents per hour. We had been promised $1.50 and $1 per hour. Do the math. The party cost $1.80 and the techs, and I got 65 cents per hour raises. When I asked about the discrepancy, Jeff said the party funds were cut to $100, and he was only allowed a $1 per hour raise to share with the team. I was working on contacting the home office again when he called me into his office to terminate me at the site, and told me to report to the home office for relocation on Monday. When I got to the home office, I was handed termination papers for the company. They, the personnel officer and Jeff, were there to process me out. I read the form, "Reason for Leaving," very carefully and noticed I could send it to the corporate headquarters, out of state, if I so elected. The address was printed on the form. They tried to stop me from doing that by saying you must give it to Jeff for processing. I told them what was written on the form, and I elect to send it to headquarters, and walked out of the office. I sent my papers the next day, registered, to the company headquarters the next day. I learned that 2 weeks after I sent my papers into the company headquarters with all the above information on it, that they, Jeff and the personal officer, were let go. Apparently, they were doing this same thing with 4 other sites and pocketing the difference. This is not the end of the story. Read on. I landed a job at a startup software company that lasted 4.5 years until the dot-com boom went bust. 18 months into my new job, I had to expand the company network into 2 other buildings. I contacted a well-known local network equipment provider for prices and availability along with 2 other vendors. Each of the vendors visited the facility and provided quotes that were fairly close in price, but had delivery times longer than I'd hoped. The well-known company, however, was a different case. I spoke to the senior sales representative, who told me he would have the sales representative that handled the brand I wanted contact me to make arrangements for a visit to my office. The sales representative said they could be there the next day to determine placement and capacity so they could provide a quote. Our receptionist let me know the network equipment guys were there. I grabbed the keys for the buildings and headed to the lobby. When I got there, I got a sick feeling when I saw Jeff. He was the representative for the network gear I wanted. He greeted me like I was a long-lost friend. I held my cool and greeted him in the most professional manner I could muster. I got through this and received a quote which was higher than usual. I had done business with this reseller before and was pleased with their results. However, when I got the breakdown of the quote, I noticed the prices quoted with other resellers was 15% higher than the others, and the labor cost was about 10% higher. I informed the local company that I was not selecting them for the business. When the senior sales manager asked why I gave him the reason, I shared the pricing info and the history behind Jeff. He was shocked as these were not the numbers Jeff had shown him for the quote. I told him I could not trust Jeff because he was just as dishonest as ever. This cost them a large chunk of business, as I had already awarded the business to one of the other vendors. I did not see or hear about Jeff until 6 years later. It is now 6 years later, and I'm in a Fortune 500 company setting up and maintaining a data center, PCS, and network equipment. We need to replace some aging servers, and we had representatives from all the brands coming into the office. Yes, indeed, there was Jeff as the representative for a well-known brand of server. He again greeted me as a long-lost friend. I greeted him with a simple hello. He tried to engage me in conversation, but I politely excused myself as I had some high-priority maintenance operations that needed my attention. Later that afternoon, my manager asked me if I knew the sales representative as he had mentioned it to my manager. I said yes, I know him and his reputation. Oh, he seems very nice and eager to please us. My manager says. I asked if I could speak honestly about him, Jeff. He said he wanted me to be honest. I gave him all the details of the encounters and behaviors. I told him not to trust what he says, check the equipment we get, the cost of the items, and to get it in writing. Well, the first invoice arrived for the equipment we needed, and the price was higher than quoted. When my management challenged the cost and delivery periods as not what was agreed to, Jeff's boss was embarrassed and angry at the bait-a-switch Jeff pulled. It turned out he was adding unnecessary items to what we asked for as forgotten necessary parts. These items were not only unnecessary, but used and sold to us as new. Long story, I know, but the end result is Jeff was terminated for misrepresenting the cost, brought up on fraud charges for changing signed invoices and criminal charges of embezzlement.